Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our former guest back onto the show. His name's Steve Young. He's an official doctor, which we'll get into in a minute, and he's also a DJ known by the name Headflux. So I'm just checking the website here. We've had a few technical issues, but Steve can't see himself, but I'm just checking. He is actually live on my website, so people can see you, Steve. So that's the main thing.
So everyone can see me next to you, all right? Because all I can see is a blue square, but
yeah,
everyone fine.
Okay, yeah. So that's cool. So basically, we've got you on the show today. We have talked a little bit about your ideas about alchemy and stuff in the past, but now you've went the next step and you've produced a book, A Fool's Wisdom: Science, Conspiracies, and the Secret Art of Alchemy. I have been listening to the audiobook and going over the text here. There is quite a lot in it. So I thought rather than try and get through the whole book today, we'll kind of break it down into the two sections. The first part one is Secret Conspiracies, and we'll do that today, and then we'll get you back on to go into the Secret Art of Alchemy in more detail. I was actually quite pleased when you sent me the book from one fool to another. Some people might take offense at that, but I was quite honoured.
Yeah, there's many kinds of fools, as I realised myself. Yeah.
So just on that topic, what would you say a fool is when you talk about a fool's wisdom?
Well, for me, I came to it through music. It was a realization, firstly, that what I'd been doing with my life by following this dream of doing music was I was an entertainer. I was a hired entertainer, and quite often it's very clown-like behavior, right? You're getting up on stage, you're in colorful clothes, you're playing music and dancing around all silly, and helping people loosen up and everything. And even though I took it quite seriously because I was coming from a scientific background, I'd had all this like 10 years science training, plus I worked in the corporate world for 5 years, like doing like business and IT and stuff. So I kind of approached my music career with a scientific and a business mind. I was taking it very seriously, but then when I saw the other side of it, I saw like how people see me, as it were. And I'm a hired entertainer. I'm basically like a fool. It's almost like a clown. Like a DJ is a very similar thing to a clown, and that's not supposed to be an insult to DJs, by the way, but it's just like an archetype. And so when I realized that, I just felt this, I don't know, just sort of relief or like the self-knowledge that just came with it. And I thought I didn't need to take myself quite as seriously. And I felt more free to just say what it is I really think, because we need fools in society. The fools are the ones who say what nobody else will say. The ones that live like the sort of opposite life to everyone else. And, I felt that increasingly. And then, of course, when 2020 came around, I felt like, I was just on the opposite side of reality from everyone else at that point. Yeah. So I really embraced the archetype of the fool, but I'm not obviously a comic or a stand-up comedian, which would be another flavor of it. Yeah.
You did say there's a few different types of fools in the book. It's the idea of the court jester, isn't it? The one who can tell the truth to the king, but can't say it directly, so he does it in a clever way. So the king can laugh at himself and probably keep some humility, which is quite important, you would think, for people in power, though obviously these days they don't seem to have much sense of humour about them.
Well, that's it. These days they kill the fool, right? And like people getting put in jail for posting memes, for example, is an example of killing the fool. The king killing the fool, right? Because he can't take a joke. Because it's so corrupt that even like a little joke online is enough to like get to jail. Crazy things in this country at the moment. It's just absolutely nuts. Like,
society we live in is absolutely twisted, inverted, and completely bananas. But you talk about being a fool, that doesn't seem to be how you got to this position, though, because as we've touched on, you are a doctor. You did go to university, and this is really what the first part of the book goes into, is like how you were ingrained in the system, took it all so seriously, and then over time you've come to realise it's all kind of fallible. Like I interviewed Dawn Lester recently, and the subtitle of her book with David Parker is Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong. Reading this book, you almost think like why everything you thought you knew about science is wrong. Because you were steeped in that. So would you like to go in a little bit about your background and how you got your PhD and the serious head you had? I know that helped with the music production later on.
Yeah, I mean, I got a flavor for physics pretty early on in life. Actually, I remember my mom got these like magazine periodicals. It was like mysteries of the universe type stuff, and there was stuff in there about Einstein and space time and wormholes and time travel and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. I was obviously a young kid into sci-fi and stuff. Um, and then when I learned that you can actually study that stuff at university, I was just like, why wouldn't I, right? So I stuck in at school in physics and maths and chemistry and stuff. I mean, I wasn't very good at English and biology, but I did the physics and all that, and I got into St Andrews and studied astrophysics. And then about halfway through my degree, I changed it to theoretical physics, which includes a lot of astrophysics stuff as well, but it's more focused on quantum mechanics, basically.
What made you do that change? What?
It was just more interesting. I thought like astrophysics was pretty boring. Once you really got up close to it, it seems so exciting. At first, you're like learning about the stars and everything, but it's actually just incredibly analytical. It's just lots and lots of useless information. But I felt like quantum physics was more exciting. It was like that was going to be our future, like quantum physics is going to be part of like the new technologies and stuff. So I thought if I learn about that, yeah, I'm going to be set for the future kind of thing. And so I went from there to did a PhD down in Surrey, the University of Surrey, and this was in theoretical nuclear physics. So this is an application of quantum physics. So essentially, it's using quantum physics to create models of different types of nuclear reactions. And there's loads of departments that do this. And, it's all algebraic. It's all computer codes, computer modeling, running programs that take days and days and days to like spit out numbers, So if you get it wrong, you gotta go back and debug it and still run it all over again. It's going to take like a week to get the result again or something. So it is hard work, and it was slow and laborious, and I got through it. I did the PhD. Some people online have been saying my PhD's fake, but it's not.
Writing that took you a few years, so that actually helped you in the process of writing this book as well, being able to.
Well, yeah. So I don't want to poo-poo education entirely. I think there's value to learning, and obviously I love learning, and I love science actually. But I came to an understanding that a lot of science that we're being taught is it's basically new. It's new ideas that have been bolted on to the end of history, and there's actually a much older science that was the standard way of working with materials in the world for a long time. And the more I scrutinized the modern science, the more I found it was just falling apart. And there's been a number of movements against modern science in recent years, whether it's like the flat Earth movement or the anti-vax movement or the anti-germ theory or like no virus movement, all these things, and just really looking at those people and listening to them and understanding their point of view and understanding the logic they're using. I took that and then applied it to my own expertise, which is in atoms and nuclei and theoretical physics, and I found a lot of the same problems, a lot of the same logical fallacies, like lack of evidence for existence of atoms, like all this kind of stuff. So I thought, wow, all this modern science stuff is really highly theoretical. I think people don't quite get just how highly theoretical it is and how it doesn't quite link in with reality as much as you think it does. And so I wanted to piece that apart and help people understand there's a difference between theoretical and practical science, and they don't necessarily join up.
Yeah, I think you've done a really good job with that in the book. The fact that you went down the other side of it, with the theoretical and everything on a blackboard, and like how we get told for sure there's these protons with nuclei and all this stuff, and there's an atom, and that's written in stone, and then you take everything from there. But it's like the thing with a virus, you get told there's a virus and you've got an immune system, but if you go just back that one step, well, how do you prove there's a virus, or how do you prove there's an atom? Has anyone ever seen one? It's like, no, it's all just kind of imaginary, you could say, and based in the ethereal rather than the practical world, which alchemy, because you were saying there's like almost you thought there was a need for a new science, but then you realized alchemy and these things we had in the past we're based in reality, and that's basically much more practical and real in a true form of science, you could say, because there is an experiment, you can test it and you can prove it. Whereas in theory, it's all just like you could do all these numbers in the program and then something pops out. How do you know you're right? You know?
Yeah. And the thing is, even if your theory can be made to match experiment, it still doesn't mean that it's a real thing in reality. There's this thing called the reification fallacy in the logical fallacies, and this is like when you believe something abstract to be something concrete. And this is, the case with viruses and things like gravity. These are abstract ideas that are like written in, symbolic language, mathematics, like on paper, on blackboard. And then they are believed because of their mathematical, because of their mathematical properties, they're believed to be real living agents acting in the universe, even though we don't see them anywhere, we can't measure them, right? It's like, this is the reification fallacy. And, there's other fallacies like affirming the consequent, right, which is a good one. So they'll say something like, well, atoms cause things to wiggle. So if we see something wiggling, that must be because of atoms, right?
Yeah. Einstein's one, basically.
Yeah. It's just like they do the same sort of thing with viruses. Like, well, viruses cause disease. So if we see someone with disease, that must be because of a virus, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, come on, people, like, you got to hold it proof to a higher standard than that.
Well, that's the thing, because it all seems so mumble jumble and high and mighty, and you have to go university to understand these things. And these people are cleverer than us; they've got the white coats. Is that a appeal to authority, or authority knows best?
Appeal to authority, yeah. There's appeal to authority, which would be something like, oh, atoms definitely exist because Einstein proved it in 1905.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, and that's that's basically quantum mechanics will say that. It's like one guy did it one time 115 years ago, and that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
It's like, no, who's doing it now? How are atoms being proven to exist now today with all our technology? And I look and I look and I look, and I can't find any evidence today that anyone's working with atoms or doing anything with that theoretical knowledge.
Because David Icke often talks about, according to mainstream science, the world is these atoms in 99% empty space. So we're all, everything's empty. And I don't know, I think to me that kind of takes away the meaning of life. I don't know, it's almost like there's an emptiness. So in reality, that's this quote of mainstream science and everything being empty, because that's what the atom essentially is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then there's like these balls and within it is empty space, so we're all just made up of almost nothingness. So that's false, you would say, yeah?
Yeah, well, it's very much rooted in that kind of nihilistic philosophy. So when you go back to the ancient origins of atomism, and they tell us that there's like 3 or 4 Greek philosophers who came up with the idea. But it's actually pretty sketchy. I mean, like Democritus, they say, came up with atomism, and his mentor, Luciferus, I think was the name. Now, the problem is both those ancient Greeks have no surviving writings or any proof that they even existed, right? It's like they could have been written into history by the Romans at a later date, which, so that maybe that happened. But we're told anyway that they came up with the idea that everything was made from atoms floating in a void. And Aristotle, who I think was a real person, anyway, he was strongly opposed to atomism, and he wrote extensively about the 4 elements in the ether, and that became the Aristotelian worldview, or Aristotelian physics, you could call it. And it was the standard, like, scientific paradigm the world over for 2,000 years, like, literally from, and this is official history, from like 3rd, 4th century BC through to 17th century. Like, the whole world subscribed to Aristotelian physics: fire, earth, air, and water, and ether, and that was it. And it's been, the Romans revived atomism in the 17th century using people like Newton and Robert Boyle and these sort of physicists who were held up as the revolutionary minds of the new generation. And they turned it around. They were writing stuff against Aristotle. They were, writing against the ether. And over the next few hundred years, they eventually disproved the ether with modern science and completely adopted this atomistic philosophy, called it quantum mechanics. So it's a long process of, changing beliefs. But the Romans were, they were the ones that were active in actually changing the whole worldview, with heliocentrism and with the atomism and all these things. It all came from the Catholic Church, basically.
If you look into the history of certain people like Newton and Darwin, and they've all got kind of dodgy connections, and again, you wonder if they're just placed in history just to be the guy that invented gravity or discovered gravity or whatever, just to put these theories forward. Like Knowles mentioned there, Romans or Tartarian. Some people think there was a Tartarian kind of world where we had free energy, and that would be basically using the ether. Mm-hmm. Most people know about fire, air, earth, and water. Mm-hmm. What would you describe as the ether? What element is that?
Yeah, well, ether, I mean, they call it the fifth element, but it would be essentially the space itself, or what you call space these days. Because the argument with modern science is where they were trying to say that space is empty, whereas ether is not empty, it's a fluid. It's been described as a fluid with a very, very low viscosity, so like a very, very fine fluid, very thin fluid.
So air is obviously, it's not air then, ether.
No, it's similar to air, but the difference would be, like, if you're flying on an airplane, for example, the air goes around the airplane, but the ether will just go right through, right? So the ether is able to penetrate everything. It's like everywhere all at once. Yeah. So when you're moving, the ether is flowing through you, but the air is flowing around you.
Yeah.
So and this was actually standard knowledge, because they talked about something called ether drag or ether drift. And this whole Michelson-Morley experiment was actually set up to measure this. But it's just interesting when you look at it, because they did this experiment and then they ended up saying the ether wasn't real. And there's a whole thing with there. They used it to debunk the ether, but the whole time they were assuming this ether drag existed, that actually, you would be able to, if you're moving, the ether is dragging through you. Now, in physics, they say there's Newton's first law, which says if a body's in constant motion at a constant speed, it will not change speed or slow down unless a force is applied to it, right? Now, the fortunate thing is this just doesn't happen in reality, right? You always get slowed down. If you're moving and there's no force applying, you will slow down. Even if you're on a frictionless surface, it'll still happen. So yeah, Newton's first law doesn't really hold up anymore.
But ether drag is doing that then?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. It's like the ether is like dragging through us. And I had an argument with a guy about this recently, but because they say in relativity, they say traveling is indistinguishable from rest, and I'm just like, bullshit, it is. I'm like, I've traveled all over the place. Like, it is not indistinguishable from rest. I mean, yes, you can sit on the airplane and drink your glass of wine or whatever. Your glass of wine isn't flying away, but it's not indistinguishable from being on the ground at rest. There's something about not moving that is different from being in movement. And people say, well, theoretically, if there was no air resistance and you were on a magnetic train and it was completely smooth and you're in a vacuum chamber and everything, then you wouldn't know you were moving. It's like, you would still know you're moving though, wouldn't you? Because you got on the bloody train. Like, you're heading from A to B. It's just,
I believe theoretical model again coming into play.
It's highly theoretical. Yeah. Like, in reality, that doesn't happen. Like, nothing just keeps moving forever unless it has a force pushing it. So there's problems with not just Newton's theory of gravity, but Newton's laws of motion. And then, Einstein came along and sort of took all that and kind of complexified it and rebranded it with relativity. And, relativity's got a lot of problems as well. And it does lead people to believing like life is meaningless and there's no purpose to anything. And like you say, we're all just empty space or just balls floating in a void. That was the original intention. The people who set it up, that's what they believed. They believed there was no eternal human soul. So therefore, no karma, no judgment, no reincarnation, none of that.
So
And
these atomists were like having orgies and doing all kinds of stuff that they didn't see any consequence to, because there was no God, essentially.
Yeah, no. So yeah, no sin, no consequence for actions, and they subscribe to hedonism, which is the pursuit of pleasure and happiness and the elimination of fear. And this became it was called Epicureanism. That was Epicureanism. So Epicurus was one of the early proponents of atomism, and he had this whole philosophy about pleasure seeking being the real way to live your life and everything. Of course, there's nothing wrong with pleasure or happiness or not being afraid. But the problem with making that your whole lifestyle is that you end up avoiding like moral duties, avoiding duty of care, maybe not doing things that you should be doing that are unpleasant, taking care of things that need to be done, even though they don't necessarily, please you. So yeah, hedonism as a core philosophy of life is actually pretty slippery slope, and there's no spiritual teachings that actually promote hedonism as a way of life. It's a kind of a phony kind of spirituality. And I would say Epicureanism in this day and age is like the New Age movement, basically. And New Agers talk about quantum stuff all the time, and there is this kind of phony hedonistic like spirit.
And kind of wokeism comes from that. If you think of love and light and don't look at anything negative.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the internet stuff, like if I'm or yourself is talking about no virus or whatever in the pharmaceutical industry is bad, well, we don't want to hear that. That's negative. But actually, you're helping people from seeing the truth, which is a positive thing, because then they won't take any substance to protect themselves. So kind of leads to self-censorship in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. Hang on, sorry, just let me turn this heating down.
Right, no worries. So basically, you're at university and studying quantum physics, and you got your PhD, and then you tried to get some work. I think one of your professors said, what is the good of it? And say, well, it's hard and you can't really do much with it,
Yeah. Yeah, that was a general relativity class, in the final year. I'd been looking forward to this the whole time I was at university. I'm like, but you couldn't learn it till you were in fourth year. Right. It was only for the top students. There's only 6 people in the class. And, I asked him, I was like, why aren't more people studying this? Why aren't more people teaching this? And he said, well, because it's hard and there's nothing you can do with it. And that really
get a job.
That really sums up not only general relativity, but also quantum mechanics and a lot of these academic disciplines. They are just purely theoretical. They're hard to comprehend, and there's nothing you can do with it once you get out of academia.
So was it like taking ayahuasca and reading the Hermetic Kabbalion and stuff like that? Was that what started to turn your head from a hardcore materialist, you could say, into something more spiritual?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the ayahuasca experiences around about 2006 through to 2010 were very profound, transformative experiences. Really well done ceremonies where I had, just profound like inner journeys where you're seeing all this light and all this meaningful stuff happening in the visions in your mind's eye, and you're purging, as like purging all this like horrible stuff. And it's not just like vomiting up your breakfast. It's like you're seeing like the things that you're vomiting up in your mind's eye, and these are like entities or bad memories or attachments, or there's like emotional healing. There's so much that goes on, and it's amazing. And so I sort of got into that for a while. And
Where did you do that? Because you have to be quite careful with. There's lots of dodgy kind of ayahuasca practitioners these days. So did you have somebody reliable, and did you travel to Brazil or something? Or?
No, it was in London, and it was through a good connection, and it'd been going for quite a few years at that time before I got involved with it. I did do some abroad as well in Central America and in Hawaii. But my initial experiences, and I would say the most transformative ones, were actually in London. The ones I did abroad were not as strong as, for whatever reason, they just weren't as strong as those experiences I had.
Probably because you had more stuff in you and needed cleansed initially.
It could have been, because I haven't done it for a long time now, and I don't really feel called to it at this time. It's like when you've got the message, hang up the phone, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was that, and
so it really breaks you out of a materialistic viewpoint. A lot of people report that, like, even the most like stubborn atheists, like, once they've kind of gone within and experienced the psychedelic journey of that magnitude, they come back and they're like, okay, right, there's something to this spiritual stuff.
There was a vision that you had that's quite an interesting story in your book about you then led to a tattoo, and then you discovered years later there was more meaning to that.
Yeah, the tattoo. Yeah, that was quite interesting. I was at Boom Festival, which is like a week-long, trance festival, psychedelic trance festival, and it was the first time I'd been to something like that. And I just had this vision. I don't remember the first time I had the vision, but it was a persistent vision in my head that just was with me throughout the week. And then when I got back, I started drawing it, and eventually decided to get it tattooed. And it was a chakras, like the 7 chakras, with the DNA double helix, like around the chakras and then splitting out at the top. And anyway, I thought it was a original idea. I thought it was like something I'd like uncovered in my soul or whatever. Sure, I might have seen it around, I don't know, but I then later found out that there's a symbol called the Caduceus, which has a staff with 2 snakes and wings on top, and it's a ancient symbol of alchemy and healing, and it relates to Hermes. And anyway, and it's on my arm. It's like, basically, I can show you there, but
all right, quite a big one, yeah. So that was a vision you had, something like that.
It was a vision idea, just because I thought the chakras were like the Eastern view of the body as energy in the ether, and then the DNA was like the Western view of the body as molecules, and so like joined it together. But then I find out it's basically just like the Caduceus, because the Caduceus has a rod representing the spinal column. The chakras also represent the spinal column because they go up and down the spinal column. And then the DNA is often called the serpents, right? The DNA helix is often called the 2 serpents or whatever. So the whole thing corresponded. And so this thing on my arm, I thought it was just an idea that I made up. It turned out to be this ancient symbol. Yeah, it's pretty weird.
The elements in it. You said there was bubbles for the water, and
the elements. I only discovered that like last year. Yeah, so I've got there's a star, a heart, and a music note, and some bubbles. And then I realized the star is fire, the music is the air, heart is the earth. Earth is an anagram of heart, and then bubbles are water. So it's got the 4 elements, and that wasn't intentional when I designed it either. So I didn't even know about the 4 elements or alchemy or anything when I got the tattoo done. So.
So you drew that and gave that to the tattoo artist. So that's exactly your vision that you've got there.
Well, no, I drew a sketch of it and I gave it to an artist called Heather Crowther, who who I'd known for some time, and I asked her to actually make the version that got drawn on my arm. So I gave her a sketch, and then she drew this one, and then I got it tattooed. Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So
I'm not much at drawing, to be honest.
No, neither am I. You can't be good at everything.
Yeah.
But so you're we touched on it earlier, but I'll just mention it now. So this kind of scientific training that you had, and then you were doing music kind of as a hobby, and then you got a job in the corporate world, but you're still doing music as a hobby. Yeah. How did this training that you had help your music? What was the connection there? Because you do electronic music.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So what I found was like all the stuff that's good about physics is basically wave theory. It all comes down to like waves, and engineering, and like what they call the simple harmonic oscillator, like the sine wave, the cosine wave, all that, like all the like real physics, real engineering uses wave theory. And to the extent which physics works, that's the part of it that works, right? The energy, frequency, vibration, that all works. Very precise science, very good. And music is one application of that. And so synthesizers and audio software actually contains a huge amount of physics in it. Lots of physics knowledge has been put into synthesizers and music software. And in fact, more than any other area of technology, I see more physics going into music software than anything else. Like, it's incredible what you could do with waves now. And so, yeah, and of course, I love music. I love raving in that as well. But it also just seemed like it was this application of physics because I was working with waveforms, and there's all these familiar mathematical terms that I'd learned about in my physics education. So, music is an application of physics, really. I mean, music can be just instinctive. You can, just hit things and muck around without knowing any music theory. But the music theory itself is all based on physics, on the vibration of strings and everything. And it's very exact. And it works very well because with it, you can get infinite amount of songs. Every song different to the last, right? And actually, I just remembered you played that song at the start with that AI track. That was crazy, man. Yeah, I didn't expect that. Yeah, I mean, the AI has got to a point now where it's making tunes like that. I mean, that's
basically I'm using that software. I've got 4 books of poetry. Well, 4 books, 3 of them poetry, and I'm going through every poem and just turning it into a music track by hitting a button, putting the lyrics in, hitting a button, choosing the style I want, and out pops a song. It's absolutely insane. Some people are against me because they're, "Oh, Billy, you're using AI." It's whatever, I know it's not all good, but to me, it's like I can't work with lots of musicians and they're going to work on my music, my lyrics. So it's just a way to showcase my words in a unique way, and it's there. I'm using it guilty as charged, but
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, the thing with AI, it lets us, it lets the individual benefit from the work of the collective, right? It's like, we can't all, produce the music or make the graphics or do the paintings or do the things, but when we're making content, we just need stuff quickly that says what we need it to say. And
that's what I'm thinking. For speed, for speeding things up, it's quite a useful tool, and it's just a tool, really. It depends.
It is. That's good. Yeah, I've been using AI in my research flow at the moment, and it's fantastic. I mean, you're essentially talking about something which has read every book. Like, even like obscure alchemy books and stuff. I'm like, have you read this book? They're like, yep. I'm like, all right, tell me like the key points. What's he saying about this and everything? It's just incredible. Like, I think back to the university days, right? Going to like the university libraries, right?
Yeah.
Every department had its own library, plus there's a major library in the center of town. You're going in, there's just like racks and racks and racks of books. You're going through them all, like looking for. I mean, we now can access all that just by, typing and asking. We don't have to go and read all the books, right? And I think that's pretty amazing.
Well, just one thing struck me there. Talking about music and the kind of science behind it. What do you think is I know you go into it in the book a wee bit again, is the 440 hertz to 432, because you're saying how 432 is more perfect.
Yeah.
Harmonies and stuff. Would you like to explain that a little bit?
Yeah. It's with there's 2 aspects to it. There's the reference tuning going from 440 to 432. There's also the temperament, which is the spacing between the notes. So we have something called equal temperament, which is the standard music tuning, and it's 440 as well. And the problem is it's just not accurate enough, basically. That when you play, like, for example, a common chord like C major, if you do it in 440 in proper temperament, then you'll get this perfect tone, like a solid tone from playing the notes together, like a solid wave. But when you do it in normal tuning in 440, the wave will shake. There's a distortion to it because the frequencies actually misalign by a factor of about 2%. And this is, you can demonstrate this easily enough in a DAW. So yeah, there's about 2 to 3% like misalignment of the waves.
So it's like dissonance. It creates a dissonance that you're not really fully aware of, but it's just that unease.
Yeah, just a slight uneasy like beating sound, like whenever you play certain chords, whereas those chords should be like solid tones if they're tuned properly, but they beat and waver.
Yeah.
So you can actually show that. That's easy enough to show, and it is audible to the trained ear. But yeah, to most people, they wouldn't notice it.
So your original music you would have done in 440, now you're doing music in 432.
Yes, yeah.
Have you went back and changed the other one, or you just leave it as it is?
No, a lot of my early tunes, I lost the projects, like computer died or whatever, and so yeah, I can't really go back and change those projects. And yeah, it's hard to retune it after the fact. Like I would usually say, if the music's been made, just leave the music in whatever tuning it's been made in. Personally, because if you change the pitch slightly, you're gonna get loss of quality. But it's better to like make it in the correct tuning than to retune it afterwards. Yeah.
Right. So just going through your book a wee bit then. So we're in the second chapter called Physics, Power and Secrets. There's an interesting bit in that where you kind of talked about a corporation being like a demon, which I thought was quite interesting, an egregore.
Yeah.
It needs it's like it needs a human host for it to work.
Yeah, it needs living people to sort of talk for it, right? Because a corporation, it means a corp is a corpse, and oration is to talk. So it's a talking corpse, and essentially, in legal terms, a corporation is a non-living entity, and you can imagine a situation where if everyone in a corporation quit their job, then the corporation would have no voice. There'd be no one who could actually talk on behalf of the corporation, because corporations can't talk.
And yet these corporations are ruling our lives in the world, it seems, by everything geared towards profit,
And that's why they're like the dead people, right? The ones who talk on behalf of the corporations, they're talking on behalf of the dead.
Well, they're just following the company rules, and they're a mouthpiece for the kind of rules of the company. And there's no actual human there to talk to say, hold on a minute, this isn't right. It's just like official policy. It's like your boss. Yeah. It's the official policy rather than a human element.
Well, that's it. That's why the first thing to do if people come at your door or whatever representing corporations, the first thing to do is just say to them, I'm talking to you as a living man and an individual, like man to man, not as a corporate agent or an employee. Like sort of like bring them back into their individuality. Because and you notice like corporate people, like they talk differently when they're talking on behalf of the corporation than they do as an individual. They'll be like, we at Megacorp care deeply about your, it's like, no one talks like that, man. Like, come on.
During COVID, I had a couple of policemen appear at my door because I went to a dentist and didn't want to wear a mask. So they were coming to my door to tell me not to go there. Like, there's no crime committed. They're threatening me, basically. And I was, I'm going to put you on notice. What's your name tag? And they couldn't get away quick enough when I started, coming at them as a personal human being, not a representative of the law or whatever,
Yeah, that's it. Because they're playing a role, they're acting, and by calling them out with their real name and trying to bring them back to their individual selves, it sort of dispels the illusion of authority that they're that they're riffing on.
With their costumes on and playing a part.
Yeah.
People call them uniforms, but it's more like a costume.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The egregore. Yeah, I mean, this is it. So, yeah, serving the interests of corporations is, our governments have been doing that for a while, and I think this is a big reason we're in this sort of state. The individual is like considered a threat to the government, whereas these massive, like, demonic corporate entities are like given, whatever they want. It's, I'm not sure what the word is for it. It's a technocracy, a corporatocracy, or
there's a word that you come up in the next chapter. We talk about counterintelligence. I had to write it down. Cacastrocracy.
Oh, cacistocracy. Yeah. I think I heard that from Neil Oliver, actually. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's like a government run by the least principled, least qualified people in the country.
And if you take a look at them, it's fairly obvious.
Yeah. I'm like, damn, that is what we have, isn't it?
Yeah. What would you talk about in that topic? There's a lot of counterintelligence, basically, which we're supposed to be moving towards intelligence. You would have thought,
yeah.
But disinformation and how much of a lie in the corporate, God knows at the higher levels, but it was the pharmaceutical industry. Some people claim the WHO were having power over our governments to implement this, what do you call it, depopulation agenda and some level, and they're talking about to keep everybody well. It's just lies and deceit. And we're all living in a false narrative of these media companies or whoever's pumping out this narrative.
Yeah. I mean, counterintelligence.
It's cave as well. It's like it's not real again. It's the shadows in the wall of fear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, counterintelligence is like huge business, like in this country. I think like MI5 and MI6 and that kind of thing. They're just because intelligence is understandable. It's like, okay, intelligence is just gathering information, like finding out what's true and what's going on. And of course, any corporation, any government, any organization is going to require intelligence, right? They've got to be looking and seeing what's going on. But then counterintelligence is basically like trying to stop other people from gaining intelligence on you. And it's this crazy world where, you're basically just making up lies, trying to distract everyone from finding out what you're really doing. And so counterintelligence is just this huge industry that goes through media, alternative media, like soap operas, movies, just everywhere. They're spreading lies so that we don't see what they're actually doing. And so that helped me to like, just get a lot more grounded when you realize like the scale of the counterintelligence operations in the world are huge. SpaceX, that's a good example, right? Elon Musk, I know he's saying lots of things at the moment, but he's still telling people that he's going to take them to Mars on a rocket, which is complete counterintelligence. It's never going to happen. I mean, they are doing stuff, they are doing stuff with rockets, they are doing stuff with drones and, building lots of military capability, but it's not to take people to Mars to settle in the new world, right? That's actually like a counterintelligence narrative. Yeah.
Well, even just the way he's built up has been some kind of hero for free speech and stuff, but ultimately he's probably letting people have a free speech, but then they're targeting all the people who are speaking out, and then they'll change the standards and whatever, and then the police will come and arrest them for things they said 4 years ago, and it was all right to say that, and
exactly,
it's like a big psyop again. And
so X is a massive intelligence gathering network, and making it free speech just gives you better intelligence, right? If your network isn't free speech, then people are not expressing themselves truly. You're not getting the best intelligence from it, right? So but obviously it's not true free speech, but at least a lot of people think it is. But
there was to me, we should all have free speech, but again, it is getting used against us, even that, because they've got these fake laws they introduce. Again, it comes back to being sovereign and being able to control your paperwork and stuff like that, and that's the whole thing we don't get taught at school. And they use legalese language and terms that we don't understand, again, against us, and we arrest ourselves ultimately by just saying we're guilty of something, but actually we're playing their game a lot. You call something the Prince of the Powers of the Air, which in the book is quite a good one, because this air, the airwaves, whoever controls them with the mainstream, it's so hard for voices like ourselves to kind of get out there to reach the masses. That those that control the narrative control the airwaves,
control the air. And that is it. So the air, like I was looking at the Space Force, the Space Force that Trump set up in 2019. Everyone thought it was a joke because there was like a Netflix comedy about it, like taking the piss out of it. Really funny show, actually. But anyway, I was looking at the Space Force, and the more I looked into it, I'm like, it looks legit, right? I mean, it seems ridiculous. If you look at NASA website and stuff, it's quite apparent it's not legit. But I looked at the Space Force and it seems legit. But then I realized, looking at all the jobs and everything, it's actually the Air Force, right? And this is the thing, is like there's no space. The air is the space, right? So the Space Force in America is just a front for the Air Force. They're basically just employing people for Air Force jobs. But Air Force is not just planes in the sky, but it's also communications, wireless communications, and internet and drones and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Musk and Trump and that are working on a plan for total military domination of the world with technology and everything, and they have a cover for it, which is it's space exploration, but it's actually just total domination of the air, the airspace. Yeah. So,
do you think Trump is against Biden, is against Putin, is against the China leader, or do you think at that upper levels, it's all scripted and they're all kind of on the same side? Do you think there's genuine enemies in the world, or because obviously Trump, he has to be controlled, these people are not in full charge of the country like we're led to believe. They're, even if you look at Parliament, I've said this for years, when I have these arguments, they're all scripted, they're reading them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Dominic Cummings came out and he said that even like the meetings, even the meetings are scripted. It's just, I don't know about Trump and Musk and all that, or whether they're genuine or they're just acting, or whether they're I don't know. I don't try not to speculate too much on it, but these people, they have so much in common. Like the different world leaders, they have more in common with each other than they do with us, and I always just kind of keep that in mind.
There's Trudeau's resigning, and he's going to get replaced with somebody who's going to do exactly the same.
Yeah,
probably. It doesn't make
it'd be good to see the back of his face though. But he's just been one of the worst. Like,
he's sticking it.
Yeah.
But you think you're going to him, and then somebody else comes along that's worse. You go, fuck, how we?
Yeah, they somehow managed to find someone who's worse than the last guy. You're just like, oh.
Will it ever end? And they've got that. You also mentioned in that chapter, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which was a document found. It's like, what was the one about the protocols of the Leonard Elders of Zion? Another one that these things that get found, but there's a lot of truth. It seems to be getting played out with these things.
Yeah. It's a kind of another one of those sort of spooky documents that people will say it's a hoax or whatever, but if you actually just read the words, you're like, well, that seems to be what's happening and what's actually going on. Yeah, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. So this idea of like quiet wars is important to understand now. We know there are some like loud wars, right? Like Israel and Ukraine and stuff like that, like hot wars. But there's quiet wars going on in every nation at the same time. And so silent weapons will be things like propaganda, psychological operations, like these are sort of silent weapons, as it were. And the enemy is not the person from the other country. The enemy is in your own country. It's the person trying to control you, right? That's the 5th generation warfare, as it's been called. Yeah. So it's crazy time to be alive, but I feel like I'm acclimatizing to it now. You know what I mean? It's just like you're just constantly in this like whirlwind of like psyops and narratives, and you got to just keep an eye on things and try to understand what's true and use your discernment. Yeah,
I guess it's some kind of, in one way we could say, some kind of training for the soul, just to waken up to bullshit and to take your own power back and empower yourself in this world of lies, and to almost be aware of it, but not let it affect you, so you can go in and create your own reality or your own life as best you can in this madness.
Yeah, totally. I mean, how could you live if you were afraid of all the things they tell you to be afraid of? I mean, it would just be absolutely paralyzing. So
when you go on Twitter for 20 minutes, it's like fear's penetrating through you by the end of it. It's like,
I know, it's bloody intense. I mean, I didn't have for today. I mean, just to mention it, just on the pulse, but with all the stuff that's happened just today, with like Andrew Tate announcing he's gonna go for Prime Minister of the UK, and Donald. I've not seen that yet. He's come out. He's got a new political party. He's got a whole manifesto for how he's going to take over the UK, and it sounds more serious than anything else I've read. And then you've got Trump and Musk saying they're going to like invade UK and liberate us poor Britons from our government and stuff like that. And they're talking about they're going to take Canada. America are going to take Canada and Australia and New Zealand and stuff, and Greenland. And so I don't know. It looks like we're on the verge of some major changes, but
Yeah, I think it's a
It's
coming.
wild times. I mean, because this is what happens, though, right? It's like the UK government becomes so weak, like on the world stage, they're like a laughing stock, you know. So strong men like Tate, and I'm not a fan of Andrew Tate or even really follow him, but he's clearly a strong man, right? And you know, strong men will just come in and take over when weak men are failing. And unfortunately, this country has just become incredibly weak.
Well, to
And
me, it's
so,
all, you know, government, as you say in your book, is control of the mind, and it's a business, it's a private business like McDonald's or whatever, and we're all giving our power to it. Ultimately, communities should get together at the local level and look after each other, and
yeah,
we don't need some guy to come in to save us from, you know,
yeah,
just replacing one guy with another guy.
yeah,
We should be taking our power back as much as possible, growing our own food, stop going to these supermarkets that are completely poisoning us,
yeah,
figuring out how to use energy better and, you know,
yeah,
create our own communities. But we're so dissociated through television and internet, we don't know our next door neighbour, far less, you know, the town getting together. And it seemed to be the elite can agree on things, but we're arguing over everything with divide and conquer, you know, all these
yeah,
little issues. We should come together over what unites us and figure out who's shafting us,
yeah.
and take it from there.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, local. You're right, and I mean, I've got more connections in other countries than I do in Scotland. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just like, yeah, our local culture has just been. Everyone's like atomized, if you like. They're all in their own little worlds, their own little filter bubbles, their own homes, and they have everything they need that comes to them without having to interact with their neighbors or whatever. Yeah, it's like I think someone called it the age of separation, right? It's like we're all just separated into our own bubbles. But what you would expect then, what would follow that is a coming together again, right? People are craving community, craving traditions, and you know, something stable. Um,
You
yeah,
talk about the destruction of the nuclear family in one of your chapters as well, because I don't know. Obviously, one of your chapters is the atomic age, and how even nuclear. Was it Galen Windsor was drinking uranium and swimming in it, and this whole idea of a nuclear war is another threat that's over us. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't actually nuclear bombs; they were napalm. And I've thought that for a long time. You know, it's another false fear that's out there.
yeah, false fear, absolutely. Yeah,
I was going to say something about that, I lost my track, but basically, yeah, more bullshit. But let's go into the next chapter. Just try and get through the first part of your book. There's you talk about what's this arboris mentis, trees of the mind.
yeah, arboris mentis. I made that term up. I mean, is it their actual Latin words? But I like this idea of trees of the mind, right? So we can grow things in our mind. And I looked up the Latin. It's arboris mentis. That's what it means, like trees of the mind. But yeah. So I mean, I'm just trying to like get people to, with that chapter, I'm trying to help people to detach from theories that they've been conditioned with, by realizing that it's actually what they're believing in is a structure that's been built in the human mind, not an actual structure that's been built in reality, or a structure that exists in reality. And a lot of what people do now is they just create these trees of the mind, and they put them forward, and people talk about them and study them and research them and everything, but nothing actually gets done in reality.
So it's quite. I like what you talk about the senses. You know, again, reality is the senses, but a lot of things are nonsense. Like all these. So you do that quite a lot in the book. You take words and kind of give a different, you know, viewpoint into them. I quite like that. You play on words that they use. So that's definitely one that came to mind. Nonsense is
Nonsense,
basically
yeah.
we can't use our senses for stuff. It's all theoretical again.
Yeah, and then at the same time they tell you, oh, your senses are weak and you can't trust them, and that they're deceptive, and you know, yeah. So there's a whole attack on the senses and the trust of the senses, but actually the senses are the best things we have for sensing the nature of the world. Like we haven't got anything better. So yeah, they can, you know, they can be trusted.
What did you talk about the alchemy of fruit in that one?
Yeah, so fruit's a good example of alchemy in action. You know, if you think like what happens from like a seed in the dirt to actually growing a plant and then that plant producing a fruit at the end of its cycle, there's a transformational process happens because you start with just a seed and then you end up with this whole tree and with these beautiful fruits. And when you look at the transformation, I mean, the soil is basically black, bitter soil. It's earth, right? And then by the end product, you have this beautiful, colorful, delicate thing with sweet like waters. You know, it's a total transformation of the earth into something which is designed for eating, right? For humans. There's a guy who always goes on about like evidence of God is that like all the fruit fits perfectly in the human hand, right? That's like evidence of creation is all the fruits fit perfectly in the human hand, right? You don't get like apples like this size or whatever, right? Everything is just like right for us to eat.
As you say, there's nothing bad that's in fruit. Even when a fruit rots, it goes to the earth and provides nourishment there as well.
Yeah. So because it's transforming the matter in the process of producing the fruit, nothing bad can get into it. Obviously, before it's ripe, right? It's bad technically, but when it becomes ripe, so that whole ripening process, so that sort of becoming of the fruit, is a purification process. It's like the outcome of purification, right? So nothing impure can get into it. I mean, sure, like worms or whatever could like drill their way into it, but in the creation of the fruit, nothing impure can get into its creation. Now, I'm aware there are people who distort nature and mess with nature and everything, like GM and all that, but I'm talking about, of course, in the natural setting, like fruit should always be perfect. And even if it doesn't, even if it rots and it isn't eaten, it goes down, it feeds the ground and it grows another plant. So this is just part of the eternal cycles of everything, So fruit is an example of taking something base and transmuting it into something beautiful and, life giving. Right?
You make a good point of that there, though, with the GM nature of it. Again, it's like the corporations have got involved, and it's like we pay more now for fruit that's supposedly natural instead of, it should be that way. Instead of, it should pay more when it's got these chemicals added to it because they cost money for the chemicals. But actually, we poison our food and then think it's great when we get unpoisoned.
Yeah, we pay a premium for the unpoisoned food. Yeah, I know. It's just insane. I don't know. Yeah, will we ever see an end to this nonsense in our lifetime? God, I hope so.
Basically, people should again come back to the community. If everyone, like I grew tomatoes, a neighbour grows cucumbers. Again, we could share. You don't have to grow it all. Like one person could be responsible for one organic fruit in their garden. Again, or take it back to the collective. When we use these corporations, we're basically dicing with the devil, and all the other food in the supermarket is poisoned as well.
Yeah.
It's just like it's just a big poison. It's like when you put the truth glasses go in there, and you just look at it all. It's just like this is all dead. Food is poisoning me, and get back to nature.
Yeah, it's like everything that's packaged and processed always has something unpleasant in it. Like, the whole thing with rapeseed oil. It's like anything that would have maybe had butter in it. If you made it at home, you'd probably have butter in it, but they make it with rapeseed oil, and I don't know. I hate that stuff. It really just tastes really weird, and it creeps into everything.
Yeah, I can't go in and say, "Well, I'll get this, pick it up, rapeseed oil." Just look at the ingredients. I know before I look, it's going to be bad, and then it's like, "Oh well, can't eat that."
Yeah.
And then it takes a choice. It's like I've been trying to get a light bulb, but it's not LED, but it becomes the standard thing. And if you realise, there's a particular flashing of that's not good. It's just you're pretending improving things, but actually it never is. It's making things worse. They use energy light bulbs and stuff. What was wrong with the original ones?
Yeah. The wokeness and the way science has gone, and I mean, I don't know, like all these like windmills all over Scotland now. I mean, man, like it's such an eyesore. I feel like every time I drive across the country, there's more than there was last time.
Yeah, and that's a big fallacy as well, isn't it? The whole, getting energy from that. They take energy to run, and then they're going to close down Grangemouth because one guy decides, oh, it's not profitable or whatever. And they say the North Sea oil is another topic about it being a limited resource created from fossil fuels, or is it something the earth produces naturally? So again, Scottish people should have the cheapest energy in the world. In fact, if you look at energy as well, it's all paid for by the national grid, and these companies that are putting the price up are just brokers who own the meter. So it's lies built upon lies, you know, and again, we end up at the bottom, everything, the price going up and getting shafted left, right, and centre.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like these windmills are just like work for work's sake. They're like, oh, we need to make jobs, so we'll get people to like put windmills all over the country, and like most of them probably won't even last 2 decades. And like you say, what I know it's windy a lot here, but what happens when it's not windy? I mean, there was a couple of week period, was it back in December or something? There was about 2 weeks where there was like no wind or sun. It was just grey and still for a couple of weeks. I was like, there goes your solar farms and your wind farms, right? Where are we going to get energy from now, you know?
Yeah, but maybe that's what they want to do to, you know, get us into a position, because this is 2030 thing and another reset possibly, you know, they talk about the Great Reset, but maybe some kind of activity, you know, destruction or whatever's coming, and they're getting ready to go under the tunnel, so they're going to make us as weak as possible. Up until then, again, they seem to have knowledge of stuff in advance and prepare things in advance that further down the line come to pass. Anyway, we'll go on to the next chapter. It's the 5 elements of scientism, kind of one built upon each other like a Tower of Babel, which is another word for Babel, really. But again, we've talked to a few of them actually. Atomism is kind of, then you've got gravity on top of that, heliocentrism, evolution, and then germ theory. Would you like to give a quick rundown on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so yeah, this is one of the main like original ideas that I put in the book. So I didn't get this from anyone else. This was like an insight I had where it seemed like all the theories from physics, chemistry, and biology were all related, interrelated through history. Like one came after another, one was built on top of another, and it was all built on atomism. So obviously physicists talk about atoms all the time, right? And but when we look at like say heliocentrism, like the model of the solar system with the Earth going around the sun and everything, this is actually an atomic model as well. The solar system model is exactly like the model of the atom. You've got the sun at the center with the planets going around. It's just like the model of the atom with the nucleus in the center and the electrons going around. It's just a huge scale instead of the tiny scale. And the theory of gravity is said to be caused by mass, and mass comes from atoms. So the theory of gravity is actually a theory of atoms producing this force called gravity.
Just on gravity a little bit. I mean, that's, people don't maybe understand how, as you say, a theory of gravity, people take that as something real. But it is actually just another theory, and probably that could be caused by density because the pen's denser than the air. But you give another explanation. You say it could possibly be by a toroidal field producing a downward force.
Yeah. I mean, there's the idea of the toroidal field. So energy comes from the top down through the head and out, right? It's like food goes in the top, information goes in the top of your head and comes out the bottom. And if you take the same for the realm, if it's a toroidal field, then there may be this etheric downward force, which is why things fall down. But the force of gravity, as it's defined by Isaac Newton in his like famous equation or whatever, it's just completely contrived. It's literally just he made up a force, and at that time it was called magical action at a distance, because if you think about it, that's exactly what it is, right? He's basically saying that an object can cause another object far away to come towards it without any exchange of matter or energy. And that is magical action at a distance. And so, physics is supposed to be this like hard science that's like only concerned with like reality and stuff like that. But it's based on this theory of gravity, which is actually a completely magical force that's never been proven to exist. And it's the fact that things fall is not enough to prove that the force
again,
exists.
it goes to be like, how do they get a helium balloon? If gravity was pulling everything down so much, how come balloons can go up or butterflies can fly, and and the ball's spinning round and all the water's attached to it because of gravity? Why is it not flying off at the sides?
There's lots of problems with the gravity theory, but with alchemy it's quite simple. So earth and water, they go down, and fire and air, they go up. So basically there's two elements which pull down and there's two elements which pull up. So you have, if you like, gravity and levity. And that's it. So the hydrogen helium balloons, they have the fire element and the air element, lifting them up, as it were. And so it's like the fire and the air that lift us up. Our breath, our willpower, it would be the fire. Our breath would be the air. So those help us to stand upright and live, right. If we don't have the fire and we don't have the breath, we're just a corpse, and the corpse will fall down, right, because it's the corpse is earth and water. So so it's not, so things fall, but that doesn't mean we have to invoke an imaginary force called gravity to explain it. And it's been over 350 years since he came up with it, and there's still no hard evidence that gravity actually exists. It's just an effect of falling, right? It's
interesting you say that. It just made me think. I was in Cappadocia this year or last year, and was in a hot air balloon, and of course they do the fire, and that's heating the air up, and that's where you rise, and then you fall a wee bit, and then you have to do a bit more fire to get you up, but it's still using the fire all the way down to the bottom. If you didn't have the fire on, poof, would be a corpse.
Exactly. So the theory of gravity doesn't account for anything like that, like the levity of like fire and helium and all that. It's just not really covered by the theory of gravity because it's too simplistic. That's the problem. It's just an idealized force. Well, just on that Tower of Babel thing we were talking about then. So there's evolution and germ theory as well, which came later. So
what about heliocentrism? Is that like?
Yeah, so heliocentrism, they started pushing that in the 15th century. And then it was the theory of gravity of Newton in the 16th century that was used to sort of solidify heliocentrism as a theory, because they were saying everything is going around the sun, but they didn't have any explanation for how that could be happening, right? And then when they had the theory of gravity, they're like, okay, it's this magical action at a distance that's holding everything in place.
Right.
And then so they developed it from there. And then we have evolution then, which came along in the 1800s and is actually atomic as well, because although it seems like it's biology and it's about life, they extend all the way back to the atoms. I mean, the evolution theory is basically the Big Bang theory, the idea that we just exploded and there was these atoms and they made molecules and cells, and it all just happened as a random accident. That's all atomism. Like, that's the atomists say that the movement of atoms is governed by random, forces. It has nothing to do with God's influence or the influence of consciousness or anything like that. So evolution is really an extension of this atomic thinking as well. It's like a story of the history of man in terms of atoms and molecules.
Like basically, we're fish with a Big Bang, and then somehow planets formed, and then there was fish formed, and then fish came out of the water, and then there's a chimpanzee, and then there's an ape or whatever, and then there's us. Again, it takes out the idea of a creator, because as you were mentioning earlier, the fruit of the tree and everything seems so perfectly created for everything to work together in nature. Mm-hmm. Surely there has to be an intelligence design, and it's not just random chance that brought everything together. But that's what evolution is claiming, really.
Yeah, so evolution is against creationism, the idea that anything is created at all, really strictly against it, which is a problem. Like, if you're an artist yourself, you're like, well, I can create things. So how can I create things if the universe is not creative, and with evolution, I mean, there's a lot of different points to it, but one of the ones that really got me was the whole idea of the first man. Right? There's no first man in evolution, right? They're just like, oh, there was monkeys, and some of the monkeys evolved into people over millions of years or whatever. But there had to have been a first man. I mean, it just had to have been a first man.
Or woman.
And women, yeah.
Because to talk about
women, yeah.
Eve coming from the rib of Adam, but actually it's a woman that gives birth. So surely the woman should be first.
Well, yeah, so alchemically, then you would have the elements would precede humanity, and it says that in the Bible as well. So the earth and the water exist, and the air and the fire exist before humanity existed. But humans were created with the earth from the ground, right? The dust of the earth, or the clay. And I honestly, I think that whole creation story to me is more plausible than the idea that we evolved, you know. But yeah, so the humanity then, or man, would be made from Mother Earth and Father Sky together. It would be like a collaboration between the two. But I think the man came first, because it's the seed. The male carries the seed. That's the reason why I think it comes first. But yeah, I just think there had to have been a first man. You know, it just wasn't like just people just started popping up, or monkeys just started randomly turning into people. You know, I feel like the human being is a created thing.
It's interesting as well. We've talked about the people like Darwin, who came up with this theory. He married his first cousin. You talk about in the book.
Yeah.
If you know about genes and stuff, surely you want to avoid that.
Yeah, exactly. He wrote on was it natural selection, the book on natural selection, but then he married his first cousin and had like several mentally, physically defective children. Some of them actually died in infancy. So, and this is the guy that was supposed to be like the king of the evolutionary theory and stuff. And but you know, you wouldn't take advice on like your family, evolving your family from a guy who married his cousin. But you know about Einstein as well?
What was on that?
I didn't mention that in the book, but actually I learned this from the comedian Owen Benjamin. He's dropped this one a few times, but he says that the E equals MC squared actually secretly stands for Einstein married his cousin twice.
Okay.
Because what he actually did, his second wife, Elsa Einstein, she was his first cousin on his mother's side and his second cousin on his father's side.
Good sake.
So he married his first and his second cousin in one go. So yeah, so some people jokingly say that's what E equals MC squared stands for.
I know, like a lot of people say. I mean, again, you've kind of debunked or there's questions about the theory of relativity, but he got a lot of his ideas from his wife, and there was actually another hoax that's put up there as, you know, this great intelligent guy, but he wasn't that clever. Even at school, a lot of people didn't think he was anything special and stuff. So yeah, just a name, you know, like Elon Musk or whatever, is a really intelligent person, but are they, you know?
Yeah. And he, you know, the thing is, he never built anything. Like, he never created anything or even did an experiment. It's like, and he's like exalted, like on the world stage. You know, he's exalted as one of the brightest human beings ever to have lived, and it's totally unjustified. It's just there to hold up this whole physics, modern science like worldview. And you know, it's interesting. I started looking into the names recently, all the names of these scientists. So a lot of this stuff is like hidden in plain sight. So Einstein means one stone, right? Which is like, okay, why one stone? Well, what's the one stone? It's actually in Freemasonry. There's the foundation stone, which is the first stone that you lay when you're building something. And you know, like say it was a cathedral or whatever, right? They'll like lay the first stone, the cornerstone, the foundation stone, and they'll do a little ceremony around it, and then they'll build the rest of the structure around that one stone. Anyway, so you know, you start to look at that, and you look at the whole of modern science is built on Einstein, the one stone. The proof of existence of atoms attributed to Einstein. The theory of gravity, relativity attributed to Einstein, and the theory of the bomb, nuclear bomb and everything equals MC squared, also attributed to Einstein. It's like the whole of modern physics. He's the foundation stone that holds it all together, and that's why he's exalted so highly,
Yeah, and in reality, they're not. They claim to be. A lot of it is image. Even your pop stars and rock stars, a lot of it's image, and they know how to sell an image rather than delve too deep into their background. So the last one on the Tower of Babel was germ theory, which obviously is quite important for people to know. I've told people about this, and you still hear them talk about, I caught the flu and I've given it to my mum and she's really bad. And it's like, I just give up now. I can't, some people are going to listen and take in what you say, but to me, it's vitally important because people are still taking and they believe in an immune system. So what do you know about, again, this germ theory creation?
Yeah. Well, germ theory is a product of evolutionary theory. Of course, it's the idea that these disease-causing creatures have evolved out of the slime or whatever, out of the goo, out of the bat's snot or whatever primordial goo it is. But these little particles that essentially exist only to cause disease have evolved out of it. And it's a theoretical concept. And as you know, virus has never been isolated and stuff. But it is really important, this one, because when you look at the other theories, right, the atomism and the heliocentrism, gravity, evolution, right? If people believe in that or they don't believe in that, it doesn't really matter. It's like you can believe whatever you want about gravity or whatever. But when it comes to germ theory, it is actually a life or death decision. And this is this is what became clear, right, in recent years. It's like you can say what you like about flat Earth, say what you like about gravity, say what you like about everything, but when it comes to germ theory, if you don't get your facts straight, you could be recommending somebody goes and takes a poison injection. Loads of people in science did that, loads of them, the physicists, all of them, like, just they all told you to take the jab and told you to give it to your kids. And they didn't even, that was their opportunity, right? Like that was the opportunity to evaluate your scientific beliefs in 2020 and be like, okay, is this definitely right or whatever? And those guys, they just full steam ahead. They're just like, give me the jab. You should take it too. Give it to your kids as well. And so, yeah. So there's a lot of
Jimmy Carr on stage telling the audience, put your hand up and then give yourself a slap.
Yeah.
Well, I hope he's slapping himself to death these days. You know what I mean? They don't seem to be too apologetic for the, encouraging people. Like Piers Morgan's another one.
Yeah.
And these people make you sick. And again, how much did they know? Did they go and take it for real themselves? Or are they in the gang? Because I believe there's a video Mark Zuckerberg telling Facebook employees not to take it, but yet you couldn't go and say certain stuff. Although Facebook was a bit better than YouTube and various other ones on the totalitarian train, but still they did delete some videos. Yeah, so basically, are they comfortable with what they've done? There don't seem to be much recrimination from these people these days. You know what I mean?
No, I mean they'll get awards, won't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
They get awards and promotions and knighthoods, and just for promoting poison and spreading it. I mean, it's mental. Yeah, it's total inverted world. I don't know personally if we'll see justice for any of that.
These days, a lot of people are talking about being ill. And they've got this new flu that's going around at Christmas. Do you think a lot of that could have been caused by even the metals in these turning up 5G a little bit? And it's like, 5G illness almost by those that have got heavy metals in them.
I don't know, but yeah, I certainly think if you had, if you've got metals in your body and you're in electromagnetic fields, then yeah, that's going to be problematic, potentially painful or whatever. Or like they said, they can actually use you as a communications node. Right. Like so you can actually bounce communications off you and stuff, like Internet of Bodies.
People have their own IP address and they say they're owned now because their DNA's been changed, they're patented and stuff like that, which is quite crazy.
I know, yeah. All that stuff is so crazy, man. I mean, I try not to let it get me down, I mean, I've got faith and my home life is good and I see a lot of what's going on in the world, but actually in my little local neck of the woods, like things are usually pretty good and feel quite safe still. But I'm concerned for my country and I want to see things rise again, because I've only really ever seen decline. Like the whole time we've been alive has just been decline. Every day it's just like, come on, people, pull it together.
Perhaps we're going into a new age, and this is just almost a purge of those that are going to make it and those that are not going to make it. And some people talk about bifurcation, and maybe this is all part of it.
Bifurcation, yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I think Neil Oliver called it the great sorting. It's like people became sorted, and before we weren't sorted, we were just kind of like loosely associated. But after that, it was like we all got sorted into our respective camps.
Yeah, I did lose a lot of Facebook friends or whatever, and I got pillared to post from everyone who you thought were your friends, and then all of a sudden you've met all these other people who are more on a similar wavelength. So it has been quite good for being able to talk to people like yourself, and I guess making new friends based on those that want to learn and are more similar mindset.
Yeah.
The only thing is they're spread out everywhere. Without technology, in your own town, there's few and far between.
Yeah, like beacons, beacons of light. Yeah.
So we'll try and get through the rest of the book. I'll keep you for another half hour if that's okay.
Okay, sure, yeah.
For a couple of hours. So the next one was the atomic age, which you touched on a wee bit before. What do they say about this quantum thing that's coming out these days? Everything's quantum. What is quantum?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm doing at the moment. Actually, I'm working on a presentation to debunk quantum theory. It goes beyond what's in the book, but the quantum theory is like 20th century atomism. So the theory of atoms existed before the 20th century, but it took a turn. It became a different kind of theory. Like the pre-quantum atom was basically just a solid hard ball, like 100% solid stuff. And then the post-quantum atom is like this, divisible ball full of all kinds of little balls of all kinds of different flavors, all like mucking around together. And, it's 99% empty space or whatever. So there's been this like huge change in the view of atoms over the last 100 years or whatever. And this is all kind of encompassed in the term quantum physics. But yeah, as I found, I don't believe there's been any actual technological applications of quantum physics. Now, there will be people who will say, oh yeah, this is a quantum tech or whatever. But when you really break it down, it's just, you find it's just, they're just using that to sell it or whatever, but they haven't actually done anything. They haven't used quantum physics in the construction of the tech. So yeah, like there's various things people will say applications that are applications of quantum. They might say things like the nuclear bomb is an application of quantum theory, but it's not. You just mix fuels together and ignite it. That's how you don't need to be a quantum physicist to make a bomb, right? That's
Well, the whole thing about the nuclear fear-mongering as well, that was part of the Cold War, and Eisenhower talked about atoms for peace. And back in the day, the children with the desk, was going to protect them from a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, the old duck and cover drills. Yeah, that was atoms for peace. Yeah, it's like that was a postage stamp with 2 Earth globes made to look like an atom. And so this was the beginning of the atomic age, basically, when the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs were dropped. Humanity entered into a new age where we now had to deal with the possibility that the entire world could be destroyed at any moment with a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like an ultimate fear. And they worked that all throughout the Cold War, and they're even still doing it.
Still
they're like, the Russians have got their big nuke pointed right at us, ready. They're ready to launch at any moment, just waiting for that day.
I'd be scared of a normal bomb just as much,
Well, that's it. That's it. A normal bomb's fine. I say to people, it's like you can still be afraid of getting blown up, but you don't need to be afraid of getting blown up by a nuke. Because nukes aren't real.
I read I've done a bit of research into the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and some people claim there was like Jesuit priests underground those things, and the bombs were placed stationary above. They were in some kind of shelter, and they were pushed from underneath. Because as you said in the book, after it, those towns were built up pretty quick afterwards.
Yeah.
So where was this radiation that's supposed to be everywhere? If there were, a nuclear bomb, surely those areas would be no-go zones for quite a number of years.
Yeah, that's according to nuclear physics. Yeah, there's, the whole area should be like disintegrating and unsuitable for life for like thousands of years, right? But actually, what happened? They just built right back. These were big explosions, and there was a lot of devastating stuff. And the mustard gas. So with napalm and mustard gas, right? Napalm gives you the firebombing effect, and the mustard gas gives you like the poisoning, the sort of radiation poisoning effect. But because they're saying it's a new type of radiation, right? This nuclear radiation, which is like actual particles, like spitting at you or whatever. But radiation is light. Radiation is fire, basically. Elementally, that's what it is. And so you can still get injured by radiation, but it's just not nuclear radiation, because if it was, then we would expect thousands of years of nuclear fallout after every blast. Yeah, and that's just not observed.
So what's one thing I did think about this, and you actually do mention the book, is the Geiger counter, because that's the one when you put in near uranium, this thing goes off.
Yeah,
and that's the radiation. That's like one of the proofs for it. How does a Geiger counter work?
Yeah, so a Geiger counter works by, it's got like a gas tube inside of it, and when it's exposed to ultraviolet light, so ultraviolet light, of course, is light beyond violet, which is also light beyond visible, because the violet is the limit of visible spectrum. So ultraviolet light is light that's not visible, right? And it has a high energy, and it's able to cause these gases to start conducting electricity. So basically, every time UV light enters the Geiger counter, it clicks, because it is able to pass a current through the gas. The gas can only conduct electricity when it's exposed to UV light. But they will say that it's a particle, that it's catching a particle, right? It's catching an electron or catching an alpha particle. But when you actually look at the underlying physics, there's no evidence of that. It's the same with like neutron detectors. If you look into how neutron detectors work, what do they actually detect? They detect a flash of light, right? They don't see a neutron, they see a flash of light, and then they say, oh, that flash of light was caused by the neutron. So yeah, when you really look at what they're doing, they're just looking at lights, and then they have theories about what may have caused the light, but they have no way of seeing these things that they say are there.
So does uranium give off more of this ultraviolet light then? Why those ones work more than others?
Yeah. So, some materials have energy inside them. They give off radiation, and it may be invisible light, but you have things like radium, which would actually glow green or blue or something. Uranium, I think, has a greenish hue to the light as well. So the more I looked into that stuff, I realized I called it radiant materials rather than nuclear materials. Radiant materials. So these are heavy metals that are able to store and release energy over a long period of time.
Right.
They call it nuclear energy, but when you actually just look in reality, it's just a metal which has a lot of like heat energy inside of it, and you can put it in water, and it will release that heat into the water and create steam, which you can use to make electricity. And yeah, there was radium and uranium were way more popular. They were more available to normal people, like at the turn of last century, in the early 1900s and stuff. People could heat their homes with like lumps of radium metal and stuff, and then there was this whole clampdown on all of it. There was all these hoaxes and scare stories about uranium and radium, and now we can't have that stuff. We're not allowed.
Could that be like the oil companies, basically? That's competition.
That would make sense, yeah, because you're talking about a sort of rechargeable standalone fuel source, right? That would mean you didn't need to be connected to the grid or whatever. So yeah, and that's what Tesla was doing as well with the Tesla coils, right? It's like you can with the Tesla coil, you can power a device just by tuning it to the same frequency as a nearby coil. And that was his idea, was to have, everyone had wireless electricity. We didn't need wires, and it does work. The effect does work. But again, he was sort of put out of business by the people who wanted all the wires and the grid and everything, which they can control. So it's less power to the individual and more power to the oligarchs and the industrialists and that. Yeah.
Right. So moving on to the chapter 7, we've got planet Earth, the mother of conspiracy. Basically, the old flat Earth debate. You were, like everybody is, I guess, at school, you get the globe Earth and you don't question it. Then somebody tells you about it and you think, oh, it's bullshit. Then, have a look at this video and hold on, there's something to this. And now you're firmly of the opinion that we're not a spinning ball. That's what I agree. What we are is up for debate, but certainly the spinning ball model goes out the window. Would you like to explain how you came to that?
Yeah, I mean, I came to that in like 2016, and I was just as, skeptical as anyone else. I thought it was going to be a lot of bullshit, and I thought they were like just people who were like stuck in the past. I was like, people haven't believed the Earth is flat for like 2,000 years. How could they be so stuck in the past? But when I actually started looking at it, it's a line of inquiry, right? You can't expect someone to just convert on the spot to being a flat earther. It's a whole line of inquiry. You have to look at all the different things that get presented to us as evidence of the globe and evidence of outer space, and really scrutinize them. And the first thing that happens is you start to realize the space program is not trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people will be the moon landing, right? That'll be the first thing. They'll be like, hang on. And maybe the moon landing didn't happen. Well, if you keep going with it, you'll find that none of the moon landings happened, not just the first one. And then the Mars rovers and the Hubble telescope and all these things, like, you'll find that are just not real at all. They're like all hoaxes. The entire space program is like a counterintelligence operation, like a military counterintelligence thing. And so when you lose,
it costs $4 billion a day, whatever they take for that.
yeah. So when you lose faith in the space program, you're like, okay, if all of that stuff I thought was real isn't real anymore, you're like, well, how do I know I'm on a giant ball spinning through space? Well, because of the physics, right? Because physics says so. Relativity, heliocentrism, Newton, all this stuff. So then you look at the physics and you're like, well, does the physics stand up to scrutiny? And then you find that doesn't either. And so, when the space program is fake and the physics doesn't stand up to scrutiny, there's no justification for believing in the ball anymore. And that's how people become flat earthers. And it's not that they all believe the same thing about reality. They don't. But they've all gone through the line of inquiry to convince themselves that the globe is not real. Yeah. And that's, and that's it. And people, the way people react to flat earth is just never ceases to amaze me, like how irrational people are over it. It's like, but
I just asked them, we're on a spinning ball. Have you ever felt any spinning?
Yeah, but then they'll try to argue that, but it's so big that you won't feel the spinning and stuff like that, or
1,000 miles per hour we're spinning that.
Like, spinning is like really extreme, like you very much feel it. But there just isn't evidence of that movement, either the spinning or going around the sun or flying through the galaxy. We're told there's all these different motions that we're doing: the wobbling, the spinning, the orbiting, and flying through space all at the same time.
But the stars stay the same.
Yeah. So it's pretty unbelievable. And I think a lot of people just believe it because they think the science is so strong, but it isn't. It really isn't.
It goes back to like Copernicus. He was the guy who came up with the idea. It doesn't mean to say it's always been spinning. He just made the world start spinning almost.
Yeah, he made the world start spinning. They'll even say that in the history books. They'll be like, "Oh, Copernicus started the world spinning in the 15th century," and it's like, well, he obviously didn't. he just changed what people believed, right? It changed from believing it was stationary to believing it was spinning, but he obviously couldn't have started the world spinning.
An interesting point you made about, I talk about, they talk about the vacuum of space. If there's a vacuum there and there's nothing, we can fly out there, then how's there a vacuum there and there's no vacuum here? Because a vacuum needs to be in enclosed space.
Yeah.
But then you made the good point, where an enclosed dome is hermetically sealed. So somebody's done an experiment where they've, created plants and stuff within an enclosed space so there's no water going in there.
Yeah.
And that could be where we're living, just all the water's trapped within here and we're kind of recycling the water.
Yeah, so like a terrarium or a snow globe, although terrarium sounds better than snow globe. But yeah, so there was a guy called David Latimer in 1960. He built a garden inside a glass bottle, and he put earth in it, he put water in it, he put some seeds in it, and then he corked it up, hermetically sealed. So hermetically sealed means that the air and the earth and the water can't get in or out, but the fire can. The heat and the light can still get in or out, but the other elements can't. And anyway, so it still has it today. It's like 70 odd years or however long it's been, 64 years. And it's still thriving. And he only opened it one time in 1972, added a little bit more water in, and then sealed it up again, and it's not been touched. And the plants are still growing and thriving, right? So, but this is actually the biblical model as well, right? So this is not like a new idea. The Bible does say that the earth is stationary and immovable, and there's a dome over the top of it and everything. So it ties in not just with biblical, but with other ancient cultures as well. And it also actually just makes sense from a perspective. It's like if you want to make a realm, it needs to have a ceiling, right? It needs to have a roof. In the globe model, it's just open to the infinity vastness of space, which is just absurd, because the vacuum would suck. It would just suck the planet apart. It would suck all the air off the surface. It would suck the people out into space. Like,
so what about the dinosaurs?
Extremely powerful, yeah.
It's about dinosaurs getting wiped out with a comet. Does that kind of take that away? I mean, I don't believe in dinosaurs either, right enough. But
yeah, no, I'm not. I don't know about dinosaurs, but I do think things were bigger long ago.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence for like that things were giant. It wasn't just like giant people, but like everything was bigger, the trees, the animals, and all that. So yeah, maybe there were large lizards, but I don't think it was 64 million years ago.
Yeah, like if we had more oxygen in the air, things would be bigger. So apparently there was that.
Exactly. Yeah. So oxygen makes flames burn bigger. So if there's a higher oxygen content, oxygen content is only like 18%. So it's basically 80-20 nitrogen and oxygen. And nitrogen doesn't do anything. Like, it's a completely inert gas. I mean, we breathe it in, we breathe it out, but it doesn't do anything to us. But yeah, you increase that proportion of oxygen, then flames would burn brighter, and then it stands to reason that life would be bigger as well. So yeah, I agree. I think things were big long ago, and that's another part of the inversion of evolution, is that we're told that we're coming from small things. We're coming from the slime and the frogs and the toads or whatever. But I actually think we came from large things like titans or whatever you want to call them. Yeah.
So just again, on an extension of that, is talking about you're not an astronaut in chapter 8. Basically, space, therefore, is a lie. And I thought it was really interesting. The first picture of Earth was put out on April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
So they've got to tell
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, they've even got the date on the image and everything, and that's straight from the NASA website. The first ever photograph of the globe Earth was April 1st, 1960, on Fool's Day. So I think a lot of people don't realize that. It's like that's not that long ago, the first ever alleged picture of the globe, right? And
that's what united the Earth, when we all seen the picture. Oh, we're all together.
Yeah.
And then again, the moon landings, that assumes that the moon is a solid rock and the gravity's doing its magic or whatever. But and I believe the moon. Talk about moonlight. If you look at the moon, the sun's 93 million miles away and it's shining off that and it's so bright. It's like that seems to be giving off its own light, you know?
Yeah. And it doesn't give off heat as well.
It's the senses as well, you know. Again, our senses is telling us it's giving off light, but we're told something else, so it takes us away from reality.
Yeah, the moonlight's weird. I mean, it's cold. It's a cold light, not a warm light. And this was when I was in Hawaii. I learned this, and it was actually quite easy to determine it in Hawaii because it's so warm in the night times. So you could stand like under a shelter with like half of your body in the shade and the other half under the full moon, and you could very much feel the light has got this kind of cold, tingling kind of energy compared to the warmth of the shade. Now, if the moon was reflecting the sunlight, you wouldn't expect that. You would expect warm light to be coming off the moon.
Yeah.
But another thing as well is you can look directly at the moon, and that actually means that it's not radiating. It's not, because anything that's radiating, if you look directly at it, you'll be blinded, right? You'll be dazzled by it. But you can look directly at the moon and see features on it and everything like that. So it's not radiating in the same way that the sun is. It's not reflecting the sunlight. I think energy is going into the moon, right? So when you look at the sun, energy is coming out of the sun. So it's very bright and dazzling. But when you look to the moon, you can see the details on it because energy is going into the moon. It's like the negative terminal of the battery, and the sun.
The male and female then that you talked about as well.
Yeah.
Male and female aspect.
Yeah. So in alchemy, the sun and the moon represent the masculine and feminine principle. They're like the king and queen of the sky. And also represent gold and silver. So the sun corresponds with metallic gold and the moon with metallic silver. So they would say that those metals are actually like the light of the sun coagulated into physical reality. That's what gold is. And the sun and the moon, they are like these heavenly exemplars of masculine and feminine energy. The sun always radiates, is always shining, it never stops shining. Whereas the moon has this more like passive, more like irrational nature where it's like changing all the time. So the sun is called fixed fire because it actually is just always radiating. But the moon is more, feminine.
It's like, I mean, without being misogynistic, a woman's emotions can change, and whoever, and to say lunacy as well, and is affected with the full moon, so it affects her emotions.
Yeah, and the moon is, I think there's interesting things about it as well, about the moonlight. It only illuminates the cloud that's directly in front of it.
Right.
If you've noticed that, like if you go out the moon, right, there might be clouds in the sky, but the moon only illuminates the cloud directly in front of it, doesn't illuminate any of the other clouds in the sky, whereas the sun does, right? The sun illuminates all the clouds in the sky, but the moon only illuminates in a little bit in front of itself, which again is strange, So I don't claim I have all the answers for that stuff, but
there's a guy I've been following called Chief Ironbush, who's got a lot of ancient knowledge on YouTube. He's got some interesting cosmology ideas that's been passed on through his kind of lineage. He says that there's like a black sun underneath, and it's shining up under the dome, and the sun's like a focal point. And he says that the moon's like more of an X-ray kind of light, and it's like a mirror of our realm. So if people want to go and check that out, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting because, the moon has very definite structure on it. And when, you let go of the whole idea that it's like craters from asteroids or whatever, and you start looking at the light and dark patches, it does look like a map. And you're right, people have made the correspondence and suggested that it is a map of our world. And again, that would be a genius act of creation as well, right? Is to put the true map of the world permanently in the sky for everyone to see. I mean,
we're living with the ice wall. It's like inside a dome area. That could be like one crater, but they've got these other craters as well because our realm is bigger. So we're getting trapped in that world because we get told it's a ball as well, which stops us wanting to explore. Even though we can't explore because we've got military and stuff there keeping us all away. All these countries are fighting each other. We can all agree that none of us can go and explore Antarctica and whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was that whole fiasco with Antarctica over Christmas. Did you follow some of that?
Yeah, that's. But again, I thought it was bullshit from the get-go. So
yeah, it's God, it's a total fiasco. It's become so toxic and divisive as well, and it was all set up in deceptive terms, but it's basically like an attempt to regain control of the narrative over the Earth, right? This was like a grand attempt to like deceive people into believing that the flat Earth discussion has been finished, it's been settled once and for all, and we're all back to the globe again. But it just does no such thing. Like it was.
There's some shenanigans going on with it, I think, with green screen technology and various other things that seem to be anomalous.
Well, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's like split. The flat Earth community have now been split down the middle. Like half of them think it might have been faked, like the whole trip was faked.
Yeah.
And the other half are, maybe saying it did happen or whatever. But I mean, the main thing to realize is that like nothing in the sky proves the shape of the Earth. And, that was the fallacy, right? It's like whether there's a 24-hour sun in Antarctica or not, it doesn't actually say anything about the shape of the Earth. It's just an observation of the sky. The two are not related like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a red herring. So yeah, that was God, it was a total fiasco. Like, and still going on. There's still lots of people fighting and throwing shit at each other over that. Like, yeah.
Almost what it was created to do.
Yeah.
We'll go through a couple other things you've got here. I found it quite funny. Again, the Stephen Hawking chapter. I've thought, well, I actually bought the book A Brief History of Time back in the day, and actually I'd done some comedy skits about it because I was like, this book is written in quadruple German and double Dutch at the same time because I can't make out a fucking word that this guy's too clever for me, but I just kind of had an instinct that it was actually gobbledygook, couldn't get my head around it. And then I've done some research or whatever, and there's people talking about there's different versions of Stephen Hawking, and some people say he was given like medication to make him paralyzed, and he would sometimes come out of it and they'd give him more drugs. But you came up with an interesting one. He actually could be a robot, different versions of him.
Well, I mean, yeah, that was just a theory I threw out there because when I started looking into it, I realized that most of the times, like the degree of movement on display is so limited that it could actually be done with animatronics, right? It's like he's basically not moving at all, or maybe just moving a few muscles in his face. And yeah, he did change a lot over the years. When you look at the pictures of him from the 70s and early 80s, like how skinny and like he looked like an old man, and then like 40 years later he's like all plump and blonde haired, and it's just like,
but one thing that never changed was his voice, but yet voice technology changed, so surely you would update your voice from "I am Stephen Hawking," to something a bit more better,
Yeah, see, he never changed the voice preset in like 35 years or whatever. Like, never once thought I could actually change the voice preset. Yeah,
you make quite an interesting. You can't debate him because it's like ableism. You're basically, he's such a genius and he's doing all this typing with the inside of his mouth, and it's like, no, please God. But just again, it's mockery, I think, to get us to believe this great guy can do all this from a wheelchair, and you should say people with able bodies and find it hard enough to come up with this stuff, but he can do it by using his tongue on the inside of his mouth.
yeah, it's a massive con. Like, I mean, a lot of people don't like to talk about that one, but for me, that is like the nail in the coffin for theoretical physics. Like, it's the fact they put him on a pedestal all this time, like Cambridge University theoretical physics professor, is like the top of the academic capstone pyramid.
We'll do.
Never said a word in his whole life. Like never.
And then they ended up in Epstein Island as well.
yeah, that just came out last year, but I mean, again, that it could be bullshit, but I thought I'd include it in the book because it was released and it was very damning, and there's photographs of him on the island and everything. But yeah,
you should say he was a bit of a ladies' man. Like, how is he managing to produce 3 children and have affairs with others and stuff like that? It's like, the guy can't move,
Yeah, he literally couldn't move. He had 3 kids, and affairs with his nurses and all that. Like, it's like when you start trying to imagine that, it's just like, oh my god, like what? Yeah, what really went on there?
Some able-bodied people like, God, I can't get a girl, and this guy's.
Yeah.
If you're on the cover of Time magazine, I guess that makes you feel.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting one for people to go and investigate Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
There's a rabbit hole there waiting to be discovered that is quite crazy. Some people say he was drugged up and stuff like that, and he was. But then again, he does change. It's like, to me, there's been different versions of Putin, and Biden, and what's going on there. Is it
Alex Jones?
Aye.
Have you noticed? I don't know. Have you noticed the new Alex Jones? Like a lot of people pointing out, he looks completely different now. Yeah,
from Bill Hicks.
Yeah, well, yeah, there was the Bill Hicks one, yeah, which that was crazy enough. But yeah, no, just in recent weeks, he's come back and he's much thinner, and his face looks, he just seems different, much shinier, and
maybe now you mention it, I don't pay much attention to Alex Jones, but you do see him in passing, and he got the shaved head recently, so maybe that was part of it. Like they done with the Beatles when they killed Paul, they all look different, so you didn't pick up on it. So if you change some features, maybe you don't notice others. You just put it down to his new haircut or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty mad with celebrities and people and like clones and doubles and replacements and stuff. Because very often, like what we see is just such a facade, right? It's like we only see what they want us to see, right? We see the content that they've made for us to see, and as we know, they can make all kinds of illusions and fakery. So
counterintelligence is it's clever stuff basically. It's incredible, but that shit does go on, and again, we are just so left in the dark with the probably technology that's out there. I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Donald Marshall. He basically talks about cloning centers, and he claims to have written many songs over the years, but they get taken in his dreams when you go into REM sleep. They can transport his consciousness to clones in underground bases, and then torture him there to produce songs. And he's wrote many songs like "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This," "Who Am I to Disagree," and various other things, "Mad World." And he's got books. He goes into great detail about it, and he's never been sued. But you might want to check out some of his interviews. It's quite
Marshall, Donald
Marshall, it's quite interesting. He doesn't give interviews anymore, but he does write books and makes them available for free in PDF. You can buy the physical copy. But he talks about cloning centers on the ground, and a lot of the world leaders, they have their meetings by getting into their clones at night time. So they're having their secret meetings.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff, sounds very sci-fi to us, but again, when you start looking into alchemy, this whole idea of the homunculus, which is like a man-made man, right, or a human being that's grown in a jar, or this kind of thing. So, alchemists have been, and that would be like forbidden alchemy, right? That's like not. I'm not. That's not the kind of alchemy I'm talking about. But ultimately, people were making people in a jar and things like that. And
all different kinds of creatures they were creating and stuff.
Yeah, like the Cabbage Patch Kids as well. If you looked into all that.
It's funny you mentioned that. My next interview is going to be in this one. I don't know if you know Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, Guy Anderson.
Whoa! Oh man, I'm gonna have to read that.
He actually claims that maybe Tesla was an invention to cover up free energy, and now his technology got buried by Donald Trump's uncle. Took a lot of it away and stuff like that. And that's an interesting book.
That looks interesting. Yeah, I didn't know how he was connected to the Cabbage Patch Kids, but I mean, it's totally gross. But it seems like that whole Cabbage Patch thing and the stork delivering babies and all that, like, was actually in reality. Yeah,
a lot of people think there's a lot of people going around that don't have an internal dialogue, and all the cloned were like they're the children of the Matrix almost, whereas they're just the programs that people call non-playing characters or whatever. But maybe they are the system's way of controlling the system, because we seem to be up against people that are not capable of thinking for themselves. They just go with the program, and maybe that's the clone or the genealogy of the clone.
Yeah, it could be.
So we've got a few more chapters in the first part, but basically you get to a part where you talk about shamanism and natural medicine, just to kind of round up. You think shamanic healing is obviously much better, and you actually get healed with medicinal plants as opposed to drugged and symptoms kind of managed with the pharmaceutical model.
Yeah.
Would you recommend people go to doctors anymore, or they're good for some things, but with regard to your healing, what would you recommend for people to heal themselves from various ailments, either mental or physical?
Yeah, I mean, I've chosen to take a path of natural medicine, right? So it's not just shamanism. Shamanism is obviously very extreme, and it's not going to be for everybody to go and take a psychedelic and sit and have music played to them all night long. But I think it's an individual journey. People will feel called to that if it's for them. And I think you know what I mean. It's like you feel the calling, and then you get an opportunity and you just go for it. But it's not going to be a choice for everyone. But I think just natural medicine in general is as best we can. I mean, like I still take a paracetamol occasionally, right? If I've got a fever or something, because paracetamol does help to like reduce the symptoms of a fever really quickly. It's like really effective at that. But other than that, I mean, I try not to take any pharmaceuticals if I can. We, make a lot of like balms and like tinctures and stuff like that from like herbs. And
well, my wife's the witch burning and stuff like that was actually old wives' tales and knowledge that got passed down to the generations, and these things probably are useful. All the different tinctures, as you say, and different.
Well,
you get flour and you get the essence of it into some ointment, and that has that energetic quality to it.
Yeah, so the plants basically, when you dry them out and they become, when you dry a plant and you crush it up, it becomes a salt. So all plants carry unique salts, and all drugs are salts, right? That's all that drugs are. Drugs are just purified salts. So if you like, every plant or every part of a plant is its own unique drug, and you can take the essence, the kind of elemental essence, like let's say it's fire and air or whatever it is, or water and earth. Each plant will have its own kind of elemental signature, and you can take that essence into something like a carrier oil. You can make essential oils or balms or tinctures, or there's various different ways to store the essence of the plant, and then if you use it at the right time in the right way, it can be medicine. And yeah, that is like my wife is good at that. She's good at knowing which plants will help with which things. And I think they used to be called hedge witches, right? Hedge witch, yeah. It's like a lady who knows all the different like plants around the hedgerows and stuff like that and what to do with them. So yeah, I find that stuff really exciting. I love learning about what plants are for.
Yeah, well, I was in Turkey this year, and we just met on a mountain journey. There's this family, a guy with his older grandma, and basically she was like getting stuff from the trees and saying this does that and this does this, just in just a forest, but she kind of knew all the useful stuff there. Again, that stuff that gets passed down, or maybe older generations know more about.
Yeah, and you can intuit it as well. It's like, you can read it in books, but it is also possible to learn about the properties of plants just from contemplating the plants as well. And this is how the shamans would do it, right? Or like they would say they would like eat only like one type of plant for like a whole week.
Yeah.
And then just feel how it changed them and what it's saying to them and what's going on inside them. And then they'll learn about then how that plant is to be used in medicine. Yeah. But we have books which tell us a lot of this stuff as well. But again, none of that's in school. Like I would have thought, if I was in charge of education, I would think like having children understand all the native plants and their medical uses would be like part of like primary education, like something that everyone should know about, right? But
you do make a point in the book as well. I talk about it with people as well. You say the word school, you get a school of fish, and they all think the same way. and basically react to the same stimuli the same way. So school is not there to again educate us to be the best versions of ourselves, and it's there to indoctrinate us with bullshit.
Exactly. Because a school of fish is a group that's all swimming in the same direction.
Right.
Because you have a shoal of fish is a group of fish that are together, but they're all doing their own thing.
Right.
But a school of fish is when they're all swimming in the
Okay.
same direction. Yeah, so it is literally like getting everyone basically swimming in the same direction as the state.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do. Yeah.
It's interesting how they use words, and there's a lot more to this language than meets the eye. Even history, his story, right in front of us.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, well, it's been really good chatting to you about the first part of your book. I knew it was going to take a while to get through that, so that's why I decided to do it two parts. So we'll get you back on soon and go into the secret art of alchemy, if that's all right with you.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, love chatting to you, Billy. It's been great, man.
Cool. How would you? How can people get a hold of your book and find you on the net? I know you've got a Telegram group that's quite good.
Yeah, I've got a broadcast channel on Telegram. I just put out messages in that, but it doesn't have the chat on.
Yeah.
But I've got a YouTube channel now as well. But my website is stephenyoung.uk, and you can find all my links on there. My book's available on Amazon. Or if you want to buy it from me with a personal signed note, then you can buy it through my website.
You have got a second version of the book.
Oh yeah, I updated the book in December to the second edition, and yeah, it's just got a fair bunch of improvements, mainly improvements to the English and the grammar. It's my first book, so it was a little bit loose on that side of things, and it's just some like small corrections, but no like massive changes to the overall.
No need to do a second audio book then.
No, I don't need to do a second audiobook. No.
That'd be a laborious task.
Yeah. Oh man, it was hard doing the audiobook. Yeah, I had to re-record a bunch of chapters because I had like a stuffy nose or whatever. Sometimes your saliva's a bit sticky if you've been like drinking tea or coffee.
Right.
These like clicky mouth noises come through and you're like, damn, I've got to record it again. Yeah.
You've been the art producer or the music producer, you'll pick up on that probably.
Yeah, definitely. It took a while to do the audiobook, so I'm not gonna do that again. But no, I had someone like review my book really thoroughly. Lady, she was a court-appointed proofreader, and she's retired now, and she offered to do a very thorough reviewing of the grammar in the book, and yeah, she did a great job. So I went through mail. It's much more readable now, and yeah, just a much better product.
I really enjoyed it. There's definitely a lot of valuable, kind of concise, but in-depth stuff in there. It makes you think continuously for the whole book. So it's really great work, and I look forward to chatting to you about part 2.
Excellent. Nice one, Billy.
Thanks for coming on, and everyone else. I hope you enjoyed that. I think it's the 10th. I'm back with Guy Anderson to talk about that book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, the author of this book. So we'll be doing that Friday at 2 o'clock. See you then. Thanks for watching. Cheers the now.